Israel Update with Gadi Taub and Mike Duran. Hello and welcome to Tablet's Israel Update. It is exactly 1 year minus a day to the beginning of this war. It's the 6th of October and we're recording on a Sunday. I'm Gadi Taub in Tel Aviv and Mike is yet again in a
undisclosed and very secure location.
Yeah, with a door that looks like an emergency exit on your back. I hope you're not in a bunker that can be accidentally mistaken for where the replacement of Nasrallah is, because that accounts for very bad luck.
I'm in a bunker with a celestial constellation here.
I hope it's the right one. You know, the joke in Israel is beginning to be that the Israelis should start being careful not to take out their own agents inside Hezbollah, because there's no one else.
Well, I don't think. It's been a week since we spoke. You have been completely incommunicado because of the Jewish holiday. I don't think we spoke about this this interview that the former president of Iran, Ahmadinejad, gave to CNN, Turkish CNN. And did we talk about that? We didn't, did we? Oh, it was hilarious because he said that Mossad had penetrated Iranian intelligence. And so Iranian counterintelligence set up a special unit to root out, to ferret out all the Mossad agents. Yeah. But the head of the special counterintelligence unit was himself a Mossad agent.
Yeah, but this is the time. This is the time we may get too cocky, you know. So I will warn us.
The war is. I agree.
The war is
no.
Although
no.
To be fair, after all this gloom, we are entitled to also have some fun. It was a year of a sense of doom. For me, as you know, I didn't always say this on the program. At times, I was very close to despair about the prospects of this war. We were, if we look back a year ago, I remember you saying about the designated goals of the war as the Israeli government defined them, that we have about a 10 to 20% chance of achieving that. You remember when we talked about the destruction of Hamas's military ability?
That would suggest that I made a prediction that wasn't correct. So I don't remember that. I only remember my correct predictions.
So I will keep the record for history for you, and I think that none of us. I'm going to mention another wrong prediction. So you can take that off the protocol. But none of us expected this to be leveraged into a complete change of the strategic situation in the Middle East, because both of us assumed that cannot be done with the United States standing in the way. I'll say one more thing. You mentioned rightly, you're sometimes right also, Mike. I don't know if you noticed, you mentioned that no war in Israel's history could go on after the United States had made a deadline for it. And so if we look back at our own programs, I don't know how many of them are even entitled, is the war going to end this week? And here we are a year after, with a few achievements that none of us predicted, except you predicted but didn't tell us. I'm assuming. So, you rightly predicted, didn't tell us.
When I used to teach at Princeton, and there was a professor there in the engineering department who used to carry, this is before the internet, of course, and he used to carry around with him a box with note cards in it. And he would go to lectures that people would give. So say you, Gadi Taub, would come to Princeton, you'd give a lecture, and you'd say, A squared plus B squared equals C squared. And then he would raise his hand and you'd say yes, and he would pull out his note card and he would say, on July 13th, 1981, I said a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And here he carried around footnotes of every important thing he had ever said, and he would hold them up and testify to the fact that he thought it before you did. It's like an absurd character from academia that should be in a movie somewhere.
Absurd characters abound, not just in academia, but also in the press. I don't know if you've heard this because you read Hebrew Twitter, and it went around so much that I'm assuming you might have encountered it too. What Twitteratis are saying in Israel is that we should thank the Israeli press that convinced our enemies that we were so weak, and therefore we were able to surprise them. Because the press here has been doom and gloom all along, and I think it's still refusing to be anything more than grudgingly optimistic. However, all this and more later, right after you'll tell us what's new on the news, Mike.
I'll tell you what's happened since you left us a week ago. Last Tuesday, Gadi, just as you were leaving us, you may recall, Iran hit Israel with over 180 ballistic missiles. I think it fired more like 200. Israel has promised a very significant counterattack, and we are anxiously awaiting to see what that will be. Some reports suggest that it will be launched tomorrow as a fitting remembrance of October 7th. President Biden has weighed in on the matter, and he has publicly urged Israel not to strike oil infrastructure or nuclear sites. And he has also asked that the Israeli attack be proportional, whatever that means. The IDF ground invasion in southern Lebanon has begun since you left us. And according to some reports, it has taken several villages along the border. And the IDF has killed over 400 fighters and captured a significant amount of equipment and weaponry. It's increasingly believed that Hashem Safiuddin, Nasrallah's successor, was killed in an attack in the Dahiya on the night between Thursday and Friday of last week. It is also possible, and it looks increasingly likely, that Ismail Ghani and several other senior Iranian Quds Force officials were also killed in that attack. Ismail Ghani, you will remember, is the successor to Qasem Soleimani. So this is incredible. It's not just Nasrallah's successor, but also Soleimani's successor were killed. It seems we're waiting for confirmation on that. But last Thursday and Friday night, in any previous week other than this one, that would have been the big news of the week, but it's just another item this week. The Israeli Air Force has attacked quite a few targets in the last few days in the Dahiya and Beirut, the Dahiya being the stronghold of Hezbollah in Beirut. The Israeli Air Force, an Israeli Air Force jet attacked Tulkarm while you were away, Gadi. And finally, 2 IDF soldiers were killed in the Golan by the crash of an explosive drone launched by militias in Iraq. Oh, and one other final issue. Prime Minister Netanyahu released a series of videos that were very interesting. In one of which he addressed Iranians directly, and in another one he attacked President Macron of France for calling for an arms embargo on Israel. It's something that Prime Minister Netanyahu called shameful. Over to you.
Yeah, and we've also got some Israeli internal political news with Gideon Sa'ar joining the Netanyahu government, and pundits are saying, thus ensuring it would last at least a year, but maybe till 2026, the next scheduled elections. In Israel, you may note, elections don't happen in 4 years intervals. Often, many times, the government falls before. In our system, a general election is called when a coalition collapses. But let's start with the most important item, Mike. Is this a war with Iran? Because the Iranians, right after they attacked, said, that's enough for us. They were prepared to take the win after the attack and say, if the Israelis don't retaliate, we're good. Something like that. That was the message, if I can sum it up.
I think it's good that we repeat what you said a few minutes ago about not getting too cocky. Mm-hmm. That attack by the Iranians last Tuesday was a very significant attack, and it was the kind of thing that I predicted would happen a couple of months ago after the killing of Fuad Shukr in Beirut. Mm-hmm. After the Israelis did that, and after the assassination of Hania, I thought there was going to be you remember I predicted a joint Hezbollah Iranian combined attack on an Israeli base, and I said that they would coordinate, and then they didn't do that. And from there, I determined that on the basis of that, I determined that they were deterred. And I got a little bit giddy last week when I felt this shift against Iran, which is very significant, that Israel has affected in the last couple of weeks by decapitating Hezbollah, by killing a whole number of major figures in the resistance axis, et cetera, the pager. The pager operation. So the balance of power shifted, and I thought that Iran was afraid of inviting an Israeli attack directly on Iranian territory, but it turns out that they recognize that this really is a very key moment in the war, and that they had to act, and they did. And we should be aware of the fact that this was a very, very serious attack. It did penetrate Israeli. The Israelis are minimizing the impact because no Israelis were killed. One Gazan was killed in the West Bank, and there was no serious damage to any of Israel's warfighting capabilities. And so they're saying nothing happened, but a lot happened. I mean, just on the Nevatim Air Base alone, where the F-35s are, 20 or 30 ballistic missiles hit the base. That's really, really significant. These missiles, Gadi, could be nuclear tipped. And what I mean is that they are capable of carrying a nuclear warhead. If Iran were to develop one, which it could do within the next year easily, I think, or if it were to purchase one from North Korea and put it on these missiles, Israel would not be able to determine which missile is nuclear tipped and which missile is not, unless it had highly specific intelligence about that. So if Iran were to shoot 100 ballistic missiles at Israel and 2 or 3 of them had nuclear warheads on them, they could, if not destroy Israel, they could deliver a blow from which it would be very difficult for Israel to recover. So we need to realize that this is a nuclear threshold power, or nearly a nuclear threshold power, with the capability of delivering a nuclear weapon to Israel, of penetrating Israel's defenses. And believe me, everybody in while the press and the officials are minimizing the threat from Iran for a variety of reasons, everyone at the top level of the Israeli government woke up and is really fixated on that problem right now. They have to be, and that's the thing that the nuclear threat from Iran hanging over Israel right now is the thing that I think all of us should keep in mind in watching everything that happens in the Middle East from now on.
Yeah, well, to counter that slightly, I think that the danger of the use of nuclear weapons is not, it's not impossible that they would use it, but it's very, very improbable, since Israel, according to foreign sources, has a second strike capability, and the way that nuclear weapons play into this game is that the nuclear deterrence is going to shift the combat field back to conventional weapons. So long as Israel, again according to foreign sources, had a nuclear capability while others wouldn't, that could serve as a deterrent from annihilation by conventional forces. Now that threat can be balanced, then we meet in under different conditions on the conventional plane. That said, I also want to mention that many Israelis, and I suspect that this includes Netanyahu, were actually hoping that Iran would be provoked, because the worst that can happen to Israel is that we would get stuck midway before another democratic administration, and this war would be wound down by a ceasefire agreement in Gaza, which would then spread to what they call a diplomatic solution between Israel and Hezbollah, which will leave Hezbollah half on its feet and Iran completely on its feet to re-establish its foothold in Lebanon and re-establish and resupply its ring of fire around us. And then it will be very difficult for Israel to find an excuse or a way to strike Iran without support of an American administration. While now what has happened, because Iran responded the way that it did, Israel has said clearly that it's going to attack Iran. And of course, the hope is that whatever the result of this struggle, Iran would be curtailed and its drive for hegemony in the Middle East rolled back at least a few years.
So let me respond to that a little bit. You're certainly right that Israel has a second strike capability, and that is going to have something of a deterrent effect.
I did not say that, Mike. I did not say that it has. I only said that foreign sources say.
According to foreign press sources, yes. Yeah. Well, I'm a foreign source.
Yeah, go on. According to Mike. As we say in Israel, according to Mike Duran.
The issue here is it's twofold. One is the very seriousness of these capabilities, even as conventional capabilities. Iran has some 3,000 ballistic missiles, and they made it clear that what they gave you on last Tuesday was just a taste of what they could do. They seem to have targeted bases only. Maybe that might not be true. We don't know. We only know what hit. We don't know what the things that were intercepted, what they were going to hit. Were they going to hit civilian centers or what? But they claim to have targeted the military bases. They could launch a salvo like that, a barrage, a salvo like that, every night for 10 nights in a row if they wanted, and with each one that they did,
very, very expensive.
Interception would be extremely expensive, but note as well that this is one of the things that's been very wrong with American policy. When President Biden said last time that Israel has to take the win, I'm talking last time, April 13, 14, take the win, as if the interception itself was some kind of victory. And you may recall at the time I said one of the things that Iran got from that so-called failure was information and about Israel's defenses, and it completely changed course this time. And last time it launched mixed strike packages of drones, ballistic missiles, and cruise missiles, which were timed to arrive at the same time so that they would discombobulate the sensors and interceptors. This time they launched only ballistic missiles, and ballistic missiles that were solid fuel ballistic missiles, so they have a much shorter launch cycle, and they get to Israel quicker. So what they did, Israel has a multi-tiered defense system. It's layered. And what they did is by launching only one kind of weapon, they severely taxed one of the tiers. So it was entirely Israel's arrow system that was engaged. The other, Iron Dome, had nothing to do with this at all. Yeah.
David Sling.
They saturated one level of the defense system. It was very, very clever. And they learned. So they learned from the last time. And then when the next barrage comes, they're going to have learned from this time. That's why the only way to stop this is by escalating and taking from them something that they hold dear. Now, if they get a nuclear weapon, then they have right now they have an offense dominant regime, military balance. With these disruptive military capabilities that can penetrate Israel's defenses, they advantage the attacker. And Iran has been using this to its advantage by distributing these to proxies. If they have a nuclear weapon, plus this incredible capability to launch ballistic missiles in a conventional sense. But if they have a nuclear weapon as well, it gives them a super offense dominant regime. So we don't need to run right to nuclear war, but it means that they can launch their conventional ballistic missiles, and then when you start to escalate, there's going to be a greater inclination by outside powers like the United States to shut it down immediately because of the risk of it becoming a nuclear confrontation. Yeah. So it increases these capabilities that Iran has. They give it more clout in the international system.
Yeah, but we also need to take into account that the balance of ballistic missiles from Iran versus Israel's defense system is only one facet of the picture. And so when this began, I remember you and I calculating very roughly, and arriving at the conclusion that economically, Israel can't take this for a long time because the weapons that they use are cheap and our defense is very expensive. However, Israel has demonstrated in Hudaydah that it is willing to exact an economic price, not by intercepting incoming missiles, but by hurting the Iranian economy, say by hurting its oil production, as in lighting it up. It's very vulnerable. And this is why, of course, President Biden already warned us not to touch that and not to touch the nuclear facilities, because what the Americans are actually saying to Israel is don't do anything that would really hurt them, which is the silliest thing to say to us.
No, this is my point, though. This is my point, is that the Iranian strategy is not a purely military strategy. It's always been an exhaustion strategy, a war of attrition with Israel. And part of their strategy in this war has been to hide behind the shield that the Americans have put on all of their capabilities. The Americans have put a shield on their nuclear program. The Americans have put a shield on their a protective shield on their critical national infrastructure, particularly their energy infrastructure. They until recently they put a shield on Beirut as well, and on southern Lebanon. Now the Israelis are defying the American red lines, and thank God for that. They are, because by doing that, they are taking from Iran things that it holds dear, and it's now starting to cost Iran economically, because Iran has had to clear all the oil out of its storage facilities so that they don't get destroyed and so on. This is costing them. So this is good. The basic rule is that the only way to counter an offense dominant regime is by carrying out offensive countermeasures, and Israel is doing that. It's costing Iran, and Israel has shifted the balance against it. I'm just cautioning to say that they still have very serious conventional capabilities, the potential for those capabilities to become nuclear capabilities, and the diplomatic support to a certain extent, an American policy that enhances the advantages that those capabilities give them.
So let me make the picture even wider, because what Benjamin Netanyahu is trying to do is not just restore deterrence. It's also not just enlarge the war. What he did, if we look in retrospect, we talked about it last time, is he insisted that the war in Gaza was part of a war with Iran, and therefore insisting on victory, victory, victory from the beginning of this war in Gaza was actually insisting in carrying on the war against Iran. Now, if you look at his two recent important speeches, one before a joint session of the two houses of Congress and one in the United Nations, he repeatedly framed the event in such a way that this is a war between civilization and Iranian barbarism, or Iran's axis of evil, and that Israel is in the forefront of everybody's war. So when he thinks, when he thinks of what countermeasures Israel should take, then we have the inner circle where we intercept incoming missiles. We have the larger circle in which it is good for Israel to make the war with Iran explicit and to exchange blows. And then there is the larger diplomatic context in which Israel assumes, and I think rightly, that escalation with Iran would force many more in the West to see Israel's point of view. So that when Netanyahu says to Macron, shame on you, you're supporting the axis of evil. And when he said, Iran doesn't embargo weapons for Hezbollah, but you are embargoing weapons for us. He's trying to convince public opinion and statesmen around the world, or at least in the West, that in this effort against barbarism, they need to take sides. And I think even, with all we said about the Biden administration and the Obama doctrine and the Democratic Party appeasing Iran in a direct confrontation between Israel and Iran, which would drag Israel or drag the region to dangerous possibilities, the United States will not be able to take Iran's side. And I think that in a way, Netanyahu is at least contemplating the possibilities. And I'm guessing that, I don't know that. I think he's contemplating the possibility that a showdown will force our team, the Western team, the civilized team, to close ranks.
I think that's absolutely correct, and it's amazing that he is really the only major voice in the Western world that is defining the conflict this way, which is correctly as a Western Iranian, as a war of Iran against the West, on which Israel is on the front lines. The Biden administration is very, very careful not to do that. It's actually shocking because it's their job. As the most powerful country in the West, it is their job to put that picture out. On that note, I think it's I should have put in the news that Donald Trump came out in favor of Israel striking Iran's nuclear sites, and criticizing Biden for urging Israel not to do that. And I thought, and it's a very interesting moment here because we're in the grips of an election. Israel's war with Iran has become something of an issue. It's not a major issue in the war, but it's in the election. But it's a significant issue in the election. And President Biden is the lamest of lame ducks, and Kamala Harris isn't in charge yet. So when it comes to an opportunity to defy American red lines and carry out some punitive attacks against Iran, or attacks against Iran with impunity, this is really a moment that Israel has. But the risks are enormous for all the reasons that we've been saying. So understanding exactly how Netanyahu and the IDF leadership are going to calculate this is very difficult. Because there is this enormous opportunity, but there's an enormous risk as well.
let me inject a personal note, which may demonstrate to you how small Israel is. On the night of the attack and on many nights before, I spoke to a friend of mine who lives in a building complex called Sea and Sun at the very northern tip on Tel Aviv, and as you can guess from the name, Sea and Sun, it's right on the beach. It's also near the base of Glilot, which according to the New York Times, who somehow knew the targets, the Iranians were going to target. And I was discussing with my friend, and not for the first time, is this an advantage or not, because this will be more heavily defended. And what I want to show you, and if you are watching us on video as opposed to just audio, you will also.
So, sorry, I didn't understand. Is an advantage to be in the building, Sea and Sun, because that's going to be under defenses because it's proximity to Glilot? Are you going to be targeted because of proximity to Glilot, or are you going to be safer?
Yeah. The question is it more dangerous to be near Glilot or safer to be near Glilot? And she thought it was not safe, and she went that night to be with her mother. Now, in the Sea and Sun complex, there's a restaurant where we very often sit. There's great steaks there, and I love to eat there with her. It's called Turquoise. And Mike, here is what it looked like in the aftermath of a rocket falling very closely inside the sea, in the water. But the shock caused damage to many apartments, and this is how the restaurant looked. Can you see the screen now?
Yeah.
So this is Turquoise, where we often sit. She's a smoker, so we sit on this outside section that you just saw.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Everyone ran to the shelter, so no one was hurt. But the whole place was just shattered by the shock waves of the rocket. So Israel is very small, and this is Tel Aviv.
I think that also answers the question about whether it's good to be close to Glilot or
it does. It does answer the question, and she was right. Okay, so on to our next topic, which is the inner circle of the war. Hezbollah, Lebanon. Here too, we both of us were far more pessimistic. Again, I'll warn ourselves and our listeners that you're
going to keep mentioning all of my mistaken predictions. Is that it?
Mike,
is that what the purpose of this podcast is?
Mike, do you see this? This is my collection of your mistakes, and it's here. I'll pull it out whenever. By the way, it's a book called Jews, but that's just one of your mistakes. So my mistake was that I assumed that the war would be much more difficult. You were silent about the topic, but now is your chance to reassess your silence.
No.
So what I'm saying is, not getting cocky, it's not over. And as every Israeli knows, we know how we are getting into Lebanon. We don't know how we get out of Lebanon. It has been Israel's Vietnam, so it's also very traumatic. I might add that the Americans completely vetoed a ground operation in Lebanon, and here we are. The IDF is going into Lebanon. What do you think the situation is right now?
I think the situation is extraordinarily good, and let's go back to our mistaken my mistaken prediction, because I looked at those disruptive military capabilities that the Iran has distributed to Hezbollah, the drones, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, the fact that if they put together in the same strike and combined strike packages, they can overwhelm Israel's defenses.
I wrote a piece in Tablet. We might mention it if people want to refer back about Iran's mixed passages. Was it with John Casapolo or
Oh yeah, I wrote a couple, but any Overmatch is the one. But that was mainly about the Gulf, not about Israel. But the thing is, looking at those capabilities and looking at the proximity of Lebanon to Israel, looking at the terrain of Lebanon, and looking at the importance of Hezbollah in the resistance axis as the most important node for Iran in terms of deterring Israel, threatening it. Hezbollah's capabilities, military capabilities, are more serious than Iran's. Iran has all those ballistic missiles, and we don't want to minimize those. But Hezbollah had all the same capabilities, and because of this proximity, I thought that Hezbollah could hit any target in Israel that it wanted, and that it was going to saturate Israel's. If it got to this, where Israel actually went in on the ground or attacked the Dakhia, all these things that we've gotten used to, that it was going to really saturate Israel's defenses with these capabilities. And then I thought if Israel went in on the ground, there was going to be this real hard slog on the ground. None of this is happening, Gadi. None of this is happening. I put a long tweet out yesterday. I watched so that our viewers don't have to go through this torture. I watched a video of Glenn Greenwald interviewing John Mearsheimer about how the war is going. And they were all doom and gloom. It's going terrible. Israel's covering up all of its losses. It just complete and the whole theme was Israel can't win. Israel can't win. Israel can't win. Basically, because these capabilities of these missiles are hard to suppress. Okay, but a lot of nonsense too. We didn't get there's a number of things here we have to point out. We didn't get the attacks, the massive attacks from Hezbollah because of the decapitation. Hezbollah is really like two organizations. There's Hezbollah Central out of the Dakhia, and then there's local Hezbollah. Local Hezbollah is a better fighting force than almost any other Arab military because the junior officers can take initiative and so on. So this is one of the threats in terms of the ground war, is that the local guys have equipment at the ready, and they can take initiative without calling and saying "Mother, may I" to the Dakhia. But what they cannot do is put together a large fighting force or combined strike packages. In order to do that, they need Hezbollah Central in order to put together these more strategic answers to what Israel's done. But the decapitation of Hezbollah in Beirut that they've done so effectively with the pagers and with the killing of Nasrallah and many other things, plus the degrading of capabilities on the ground, means that Hezbollah is only capable of carrying out local responses to Israel or launches of rockets that are not well coordinated one with another to saturate the defenses of Israel. And this is a huge achievement. It's a huge achievement. And so we shouldn't be blinded to that this has really shifted the balance of power between Iran and Israel enormously. That's why we were a little giddy in the last podcast, because we felt that power shift had happened. We don't want to go too far with that, but we have to recognize it. It's the reason why Iran attacked Israel, because it is naked now, because Hezbollah it's not been destroyed, but it has been degraded so significantly that it cannot play the role that Iran designated for it as its shield. And the one last thing that these Israeli successes in Lebanon have done, Gadi, is that they have basically made it impossible for Iran to coordinate with Hezbollah in any meaningful way. So and we see that the fact that they took out last week. I assume that Ismail Ghani, the head of the Quds Force, is also dead, together with Hashem Safiuddin, Nasrallah's successor, and that just shows you that the coordinating mechanisms Ismail Ghani came to Beirut in order to coordinate with Hezbollah after the huge blows that it took. And now I'm getting ahead of myself saying that he's dead, but he is likely dead. We haven't heard from him in days. If he's not dead, he's wounded. If he's not wounded, he's holed up somewhere, with his knees shaking. So the ability of Iran to coordinate an attack against Israel with Hezbollah is over. That completely changes the balance of power in the whole region.
Yeah, I one last note on. I'm still a little. What you said in the beginning still rankles, because I think that you warning us from being cocky may have gone too far to the gloomy side. So I'll just add one bit. It's not to challenge your analysis, which I think is true, but also to say that Iran is also a fragile state. I mentioned the joke here in the Israeli media that the media convinced others that we were, Nasrallah used to say that Israel is just a cobweb. It's an immigrant society. Nothing holds it together and it could be blown away. Israel is actually a very resilient society, but Iran is not the same. First of all, Iran is a tapestry of many nationalities. And secondly, it's a very corrupt state. It's a small economy relying very heavily on one sector, which is oil. So when you go to the most abstract level of it, the idea that Iran is close to achieving escalation dominance and strategic dominance in the region, that was a feeling that, or a premonition, or a specter we were all fearing a year ago, and now it looks like the Iran is far more vulnerable than we thought it was, and Hezbollah is a very large part of it, because Hezbollah is looked from the vantage point of Israel as a very bold, agile, professional, fanatic, well-trained army. It's not what we used to think of Arab armies as being inefficient. And the crippling of Hezbollah is also the crippling of Iran's right hand and also its stronghold in the Arab world. So I think that on balance, if we could do such an accounting, the situation is very considerably better than it was on the 6th of October, not to mention the 7th of October. And one last remark on that. I've heard someone say, and he was immediately hushed. Someone say on a panel that I was sitting on that we may have been lucky that October 7th happened. And of course, everybody was horrified and say, that's a horrible thing. How can you say that it's lucky? But what he meant to say, and this is a guy who's been a commander in Golani, a high-ranking commander in Golani, not just a field officer, but if you grow up in Golani, it's like it's the very opposite of all our commando generals, which people who come from the ground army, I've had one, I don't know if I can quote him, so I won't quote his name, I don't know, I don't have his permission, but he's a general from what we call the Green Army, and he said that the IDF's problem is it promotes commando generals, and he said they know nothing about military. That's an amazing thing to say, about our generals, because they think like SWAT teams. They don't know, the dust and the metal that is the huge moving army and what it means. And what this guy said, as I said, he comes from Golani. Golani is like the hardcore infantry, the infantry that's not arrogant, the infantry that doesn't consider itself to be superior. So a dear friend of mine sent his son to be he's now a commander in Golani, actually a war hero by now, who commands a platoon in Golani. He sent him specifically to Golani because he said, I want to cure Israel from the class stratification. And so go there. That's where leadership should go to. So this guy who said that we were lucky on October 7, what he meant is that Yahya Sinwar may have jumped the gun, because if this had happened on all 3/7 fronts that we had with Iran simultaneously. After Iran has a nuclear umbrella, it may have been a strong enough shock to collapse Israel. So to bring us to the brink. So in that respect, it just may well be that Yahya Sinwar led to the death of Hassan Nasrallah and the fall of Hezbollah as Iran's major proxy in time to give us an opportunity to strike at Iran in a way that would block its road to hegemony.
I would add to that. I think that's very, very interesting and actually quite plausible. And I would add to that the issue of understanding that the real fight is between Iran and Israel. That Iran is the real threat. The Israeli leadership, certainly the Israeli press, a lot of Israeli public opinion, did not understand that the number one strategic threat was Iran. I taught a seminar in Israel a few years ago, just pre-COVID, and I had a bunch of I'd say I'm gonna call them kids, but they were young adults, like 25 years old, 20, post-military, starting out their careers. And some of them in the field of national security, a lot of them in the field of national security. And I went around, it's about 20, 30 people in the class. I went around and I asked them, name, what do you think the number one strategic threat to Israel was? And the number of them who said Iran was very small. It was like 4 or 5 of them, maybe 6. A lot of them said
out of how many?
Like 25, 30.
Oh.
A lot of them said the Palestinian issue. A lot of them said the internal filug, the
internal rifts.
Yeah, the rifts. The rifts in Israeli society. Some said the gaps between rich and poor. They were talking about between secular and religious and so on, but then some said it was between rich and poor, all kinds of stuff. And these are people with national security background. So it was the Iranian threat, to the extent that people thought of the Iranian threat prior to this war, a lot of them thought it was purely the nuclear question. And a lot of them didn't see that as the number 1, number 2, or number 3 problem. They thought it was an issue, a significant issue. And when they heard Netanyahu, a lot of them too, when they heard Netanyahu talking about the Iranian nuclear threat, they kind of dismissed it because he was the number 1 guy who was pushing it. So all of the kind of antibodies against Netanyahu had worked to sort of downgrade that. I think today, Israelis recognize that Iran is the problem, and I think a lot of the world recognizes it. I notice that when I talk to groups who are not Jewish, not particularly focused on the Middle East, they now see clearly that there's this strategic threat.
So you see, you were right about some things, Mike. Some of your predictions turned out right. This is actually most important, and you have been. And you taught us all. When did you write the realignment? That's 2015. 2015. So one day
early 15, like January 50, I think 15.
One day we should that's 9 years ago. One day we should go back to the prehistory of this, because there was a plan to attack Iran in 2010, and it was foiled by the IDF chief and the head of the Mossad, who went to the Americans. And
I was going to say foiled by the Americans, foiled by Obama.
But the fact that a head of Mossad undermines his own government is just outrageous, and we should speak about that. So we don't have much time for Gideon Sa'ar, which was the original problem. Netanyahu once did not have enough time for Gideon Sa'ar, and therefore he quit and left. He didn't have a job for Gideon Sa'ar also. So there was a big grudge between them, and now Gideon Sa'ar is joining the government. I will remind our listeners that we actually made some very good predictions about the fact that whoever joins the government in the coalition in a time of war earns the support of the Israeli public, who does not believe in internal squabbling at a time where we should all be uniting for a war effort. So Gideon Sa'ar is doubtlessly making a good calculation. He has nothing to look for, and the anti-Netanyahu bloc. But joining Netanyahu now for the first time solidifies Netanyahu's coalition and also the internal cohesion. So if we had Gantz and Eisenkot, and we call them here Herodian agents of the Biden administration, a fifth column inside Netanyahu's coalition, from all that, the only one left suspected of being an American double agent is Yoav Gallant. And now Yoav Gallant is almost completely neutralized. May I remind you that these were the people that, while Netanyahu was insisting on first a ground incursion, then an incursion into Gaza City, then the expulsion of the evacuation of the population from the north part of the Gaza Strip, then Khan Yunis, then Rafiah, then Philadelphia. When Netanyahu was insisting on all these, there were always American semi-representatives, or the United States was objecting to all these stages, and it had sympathetic ears within the Israeli cabinet. Now it seems like, would that be correct to say, Mike, that Biden has lost his foothold in Netanyahu's coalition?
Yeah, it's amazing. So I think there are two things going on simultaneously. One is that because of Sa'ar joining the government, politically, Netanyahu is more secure than he's been at any time since October 7th. Plus, he's going up in the polls. So his popularity is rising because of the operations in Lebanon, and then in terms of internal coalition dynamics, he's stronger. And now we have also a unity of vision between the security establishment and the political echelon. I think all indications are they are marching in lockstep on Lebanon, and they're marching in lockstep on Iran, and they understand together the larger strategic picture. And this whole issue of a ceasefire in Gaza being able to stabilize the whole region. There's nobody in the upper echelons of the Israeli system that is suggesting that that's the case. So I think this really is a key moment between now and the election. The reason being that after the election, Israel's ability to negotiate with the United States becomes weaker, probably, or at least there's a very high likelihood that it will become weaker, because if Kamala Harris wins, then she will be very much empowered even as vice president. And Netanyahu will be eager to begin the relationship with the president-elect on better terms, so that he's got room for maneuver between now and early November that he's not going to have, that he may not have afterwards. There's also no guarantee that if Trump wins the election, that Trump is going to greenlight lots of aggressive Israeli actions, because he doesn't necessarily want to inherit a war with Iran. So we have to. I think that the Israeli government is going to see the next few weeks as a key opportunity to make some strategic gains. Exactly how they're going to go about that is not entirely clear to me. If you have a response to that, go ahead. But I want to say one more thing about what you said before about the Iran thing. I'm trying to get the balance right here, because I am very optimistic. I do think that the balance of power shifted in Israel's favor considerably, and I think Israel's in a better position now than it has been since October 7th. But I don't want us to lose sight of the fact that those Iranian capabilities are very serious, that the American restrictions on Israel are very serious. America is still withholding weaponry from Israel. America is pushing Israel very hard not to go beyond the immediate border villages in Lebanon, and America is pushing Israel not to carry out a significant strike against Iran. These are things that Iran is well aware of and is mobilizing. And one more thing, Gadi, Israel is a small country. We know that. It's a very small country. I'm watching Turkey, and the Turkish response to everything that's going on is very, very interesting, because the Turks are noticing that the destruction or near destruction, the diminishment of Hezbollah has weakened the Assad regime. And it's weakened Russia and Iran, the Russian-Iranian complex in Syria, and this opens up opportunities for Turkey. The Turks in their DNA are, their history has taught them that when Iran and Russia are weak, it's an opportunity for Turkey. So we shouldn't think that we shouldn't think that just because Israel has some wins against Iran, that the board as we know it will stay the same and Israel will just rise. A lot of other powers are going to start making moves that are going to be very dramatic, and we've already seen that the Middle East can change like that. It's like a kaleidoscope. You move one element, and all of the elements start to recombine. If Iran gets very weak, how are the Russians going to respond? How are the Chinese going to respond? How are the Turks going to respond? And so on. It's a very, very dangerous world. That's all I'm trying to say, and it is very hard to predict.
Yeah, but if there is one constant fact in this ever-shifting sands of the Middle East, is that it is much, much better to be strong. And Israel was conceived as weak, and now it has re-established the fact that it has a serious bite if it wants to, and that is an overall good fact. There is no way in the Middle East in which you find favor by asking for mercy. It just doesn't work in this region, and that in itself, whatever the new constellation, is very important. And I'll say one more optimistic thing is that we, as you know, I voted for Netanyahu and I support Netanyahu, but this is not a show. This is not a political show in which we deal with hasbara and try to explain Netanyahu to the world. This is a show where we try to analyze news. And yet, I think now we should pause and appreciate what Netanyahu has achieved, because it was this is like a master of chess. He managed, against the will of the United States, against a fractured government, a hostile press, an unruly army, or at least the unruly brass of the army, all of whom at every stop were pushing for some kind of compromise. And Netanyahu said, win, 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 win. And when he began to say this, people mocked him. And he kept on to this line. And if you look back at what he did, he managed to take a tragedy and a terrible mechdal. You know how to translate mechdal. A terrible failure. A terrible failure for which he is partly responsible, of course.
An act of negligence that has a very detrimental result.
Thank you, Mike, for being so precise. So he took an act of negligence that had very detrimental results, and he managed to leverage that into a changing of the strategic balance between Israel and Iran in Israel's favor. When we looked at the tragedy, it did not seem possible that we could use this very easily for our advantage. And he was maneuvering against even a hostile cabinet throughout this whole complex line of events. and you should just appreciate his talent as a politician.
Absolutely
as a strategist, as a player on the world stage, as a manipulator of the forces within Israel's politics, and also in Israel's public opinion.
Also, there's another thing. I don't know what to call it, fortitude, or can you imagine if you, I don't know about you, but if I were the prime minister of Israel and all these people were raped and murdered on my watch, and even if I didn't feel that I was primarily responsible for that, but everyone is saying, listen, you've outlived your usefulness. This is, shame on you. You should just slink away, go into your hole, leave us. There would be a voice in my head that would say to me, maybe they're right. Maybe it really is. I should leave the scene and let somebody younger take over. I would be consumed with self-doubt. And the guy had on October 8th, the guy had no friends in the world. No one. There was no, except with the possible exception of his wife, and his family. Nobody's sitting there saying, no, okay, Ron Dermer, his family, a few very select individuals are, a very small group of people are saying, no, you're the guy to lead right now. The country needs you. Trust your instincts. Stay the course, and so on. And being able to, if you have those questions of self-doubt, being able to dispel them, focus on the issue that day to day on the issues that need to be focused on, and get the job done. What is that quality? Is that fortitude? Is it what? Yeah. I don't know what the right word is, but but it's an amazing quality in great men, and he's a great man. He's a great man.
A few things about that, because first of all, on the light side, if you are plagued by doubt and the alternative is Yair Lapid, that helps a lot. That helps cure you. Secondly, and I heard this from.
Sorry, I'm not. I got it. No, that's not. That is a. I know you're joking, but you're not really. I mean, when it
would be
does make it. It does make it. It does make it easier. I remember when I was selected to be a junior professor at Princeton, and I had this feeling: do I have the right? Why me? Are my achievements sufficient to have this position? And then I said that to a friend of mine, and he said, "Why don't you just look around at who's at Stanford, who's at Harvard?" And I looked at, oh, I do have the right. I guess they're a bunch of jokers. So.
Yeah, but certainly you're right that that's not enough when it comes to a leader. And I heard this from someone who actually hates Netanyahu, who said it derisively. Am I pronouncing that right? Derisively?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, perfect.
And he said, when Netanyahu shaves in the morning, he sees Moses in the mirror. And he said that, so look at this arrogant son of a bitch. But Netanyahu looks in the mirror in the morning, and he is the son of a historian and an intellectual himself. And he believes that on his shoulder for this generation is to carry the Jewish people across the Red Sea. And it's up to him to do it right. And since he sees what others don't, it's not, I don't think he thinks it's a responsibility he can just shake off and say, oh, I'm going home, call me if you need something. I think his sense of, and this is Churchillian, because Churchill too had the sense that he's carrying the treasure of many generations, and now it's in his hands, and he has to hand it over to the next generation intact. That's his job. Isaiah Berlin once described Churchill in that way, and I think that few leaders have this historical sense. And it was funny because when I interviewed Netanyahu at one time, I said, Churchill once wrote that being prime minister is the funnest thing in the world. And Netanyahu just flinched and he said, no, it's not. And then I quoted the full quote. This is actually a difference between the two men. And Churchill said in the beginning of his war memoirs, he said, before I was prime minister, I was sitting at home and fuming. They should do this. They should do this. And now I can. Now I can do it. I think they have a very, very different temperament, but the same sense of historical responsibility. And the last thing I want to say about that is that the best quote on this kind of fortitude is from William Faulkner. And regrettably, I know it only from the brilliant Hebrew translation. So I don't know what to do now, because Faulkner's use of words is just, he twists them. And he describes Satpan, Thomas Satpan in Absalom. And he said, and Thomas Satpan comes back from the Civil War. And before he goes into the house, he starts mending the fence. And so, Mike, you'll try to translate it now into English folklore. Are you?
I'm trying to look it up on Google right now.
And he says, I'll say it in Hebrew. He says, "Ha'ish hazeh she'avar b'bitza ולא נותר לו דבר, לא להנחותו ולא להמריצו, לא תקווה ולא אור, רק כאין אי תבוסה שאין לה תקנה." And that's such an amazing, brilliant phrase.
You're going to have to translate that.
This man who went through the swamp and in the dark, and there was nothing to guide him or to give him any hope, except an undefeat that has no cure. I think undefeat is actually what Faulkner uses, but he doesn't use. But Netanyahu has undefeat that has no cure. And people who know him, who worked with him for long periods, keep saying that about him. For him, there is no such thing as giving up. There's just no such option. It's like a vehicle without reverse. There isn't a reverse gear. There's only going forward, and apparently that's what we needed now.
Yeah, I'm reminded when I was doing research at one point on the 48 war, I read in the diaries of Ben Gurion and in the diaries of Moshe Sheret. And of course, at that time, the time that I was doing this research, the left, of which you were part at the time, was trying to turn Moshe Sheret into the leader of the road not taken. They were trying to say that there was this peace option in Israel's history that was there, and that Sheret was the leader of it, but the evil Ben Gurion, who is in the left's view of the world. I'm talking about today's academic left's view of the world. Ben Gurion is the guy who took Israel down this aggressive militaristic pathway, as they see it. And I was inclined at that time to sort of see the world in that way, or at least to be amenable to those ideas to some extent. And then I looked at the diaries of the two, and it really struck me, because Sheret uses his diaries to deal with all of his frustrations and feelings of self-doubt, and Ben Gurion is there, what you say, with this undefeat. He uses his diaries to think through where he wants to go, what he wants to do, and to chronicle the doings of the great man. He knows he's a great man in history. He knows he's carrying out a very important mission, and he wants to document it and think about it. And there's never any self-doubt at all. But Sheret is always, today Ben Gurion said mean things to me. What am I going to do? You see that the two are not on the same level at all. Never, not even close.
But Sheret is a normal person. That's
these are not normal people. These are not normal people. Right?
I should have said this. Did he understand me? Did I offend him? And Ben Gurion is just, he completely identifies himself with the goals, and what he feels about them is just irrelevant. So, Mike, this was a very interesting discussion of character, which I think we should pursue, and especially I should try and look up I have Faulkner in the original too, and I'll look it up for next time, because it's such a beautiful characterization of a person who has the capacity for leadership. the character in the book is actually not a leader.
It also shows that it also shows how you have this capacity to remember lines. That's commit them to memory. It's impressive.
When I love something, but apparently I read it in English and didn't commit it to memory because the Hebrew seemed to me to be enough for my purposes. Usually, I didn't think of this one. So now we don't have time to, but we should devote time in one of the next episodes to all the brilliant suggestions for slogans.
Oh,
we're getting a whole barrage. You want to mention one or two because we don't have time for more, but we need to institutionalize this, Mike. Before next time, we need to institutionalize this and start doing, how do you say, tournir? To start...
I've already. The problem is you want to do a competition between the ones, but
exactly.
I've already decided which one I want. Yeah, so I don't want to do a artificial contest because I know which one I want. Should I tell you, or should we?
Yeah, please do.
I want as sane as possible under the circumstances.
So how will it go? Israel update?
Yeah.
As sane as possible. As sane as possible? Under the circumstances?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I'll think about it. I mean, you decide, but I'll think about it because,
Yeah, well, we have to decide together.
I'll go to my diary.
We have to decide together, but that's the one that was a suggestion by one of our...
Anything else you want to mention about the comments? Because we have just a little time for the mistake.
No, I'm afraid I did not. I read all the comments, by the way, and I just want to thank everybody. It is really, really, really helpful to get all the feedback we got, and I say that in all sincerity. It really, because I think you and I were groping towards something here. It felt like we had a thing. But
people
didn't know
get
exactly.
It. People get it.
And I know that's I mean, no. So it confirms that this is a thing. I don't know how big the thing is, but it's a thing, and I like it. So that's good.
Also, it turns out that people are not hostile to our self-congratulation, which is also very rewarding. So we can just keep at it. And
there was one lady who said thanks for the intelligent discussion and the eye candy. Which and I don't know which one of us she was referring to. I fear that it's you.
I think it's the handsome goy, not the respectable Jew.
That's it. How old are you? I'm 62. You're about the same age, right? What are you?
Yeah, almost. Yeah, I'm getting there. 59.
Yeah. Are you in the 60s?
No, 59. No. Are you kidding me?
Are you going to be perpetually 59, or are you someday going to hit 60?
It has been so for quite a few months now, so I'm hoping.
All right.
So the dumbest take on the news. Do you have one?
I do. I highly recommend this article from. Oh, you can't see it, can you?
No.
This article from the Washington Post. Maybe I will tweet out some choice. I tweeted about it. I'll tweet out some because it's behind a paywall. Later on today, I will tweet out some choice quotes from it. I'll just give you a little taste right now.
Uh-huh.
I recommend it not because I think that the Washington Post is as
sane as possible under the circumstances.
No, this one is special. This one is special because they're not good journalists, but they can take good dictation. Like they are stenographers, and the administration felt that it needed to explain to the world why this war, they've lost control of this war. And believe me when I tell you that it's not just that they went and they told the Washington, presented a line to the Washington Post. Trust me when I tell you, this is what they truly believe. This is their worldview. And so I want to hold it up. I want to direct everyone to go look at this article in order to understand the worldview of the administration, because the administration believes things that that a lot of centrist Democrats don't believe and cannot, and when they're confronted with the beliefs of the administration, they refuse to admit to themselves. I'm talking particularly in the pro-Israel community. A lot of Jewish Americans who support Israel cannot allow themselves to believe that the administration really thinks the way it does. So the title of the article is How Joe Biden Lost His Grip on Israel's War for Total Victory in Gaza. So number one, it's Israel's war, right? And it's a war in Gaza. What about Lebanon? What about Iran? And I'll just read you the first paragraph. No, I won't do that. I'll just tell you that the article laments the fact that the administration has not been able to bring the war to a close. And what do you think the problem was, Gadi? Why hasn't the administration been able to get its hands around this war?
Because there is a crazy right-wing populist at the head of the Israeli government?
Yeah. Bibi Netanyahu won't let them. Bad man Bibi has defied. The Americans had the formula. The administration had the formula for stabilizing the region, but bad man Bibi wouldn't comply with their wishes, and that's why it's insane. It's insane, and it shows the obsession with Netanyahu. It shows you the obsession with the Israeli-Palestinian question, the complete blindness with respect to Iran. They do not recognize. They simply do not recognize that this is a war started by and fueled by and escalated by Iran.
All right. So put a link to that. Send me the link, so I'll put it under the video. My mistake is Ilana Dayan speaking on CNN to Christian Amanpour, who asked her about the horrible death toll in Gaza, including, she said, 16,000 innocent children. And Ilana Dayan, and the thing about it, why I think the reason I chose it for the mistake is that Ilana Dayan is trying to explain why she is so under such a strong impression of October 7 that she primarily sees that. But she confesses Israel does not cover Gaza's suffering enough. And this is how our elites are the supplicants of progressive elites elsewhere. Because what any sane Israeli journalist, and there are very few of these, should have said is that, why are you asking me when these people are deliberately using their children as human shields, and then you want me to take responsibility for that? But no, Ilana Dayan, and this is, I wrote a whole book about that. These elites are looking up to elites. Their sense of solidarity and belonging is closer to elites in other countries than they are to their own people. And this becomes especially poignant since they think of themselves as provincials and they want to rise up to the tier of the metropolitan elites, where the real elites are, the real cultured people are, Christian Amanpour, the real people with a moral compass. So they end up kissing, groveling at the feet of anti-Semites and playing to CNN biases which are tinged with anti-Semitism. And this is a not just a dumb take on the news. This is infuriating that our journalists, and this Ilana Dayan is, I think you called her the Barbara Walters of Israeli TV. So she's like the dean of highbrow journalism, and she has all this. She has the fanciest Israeli accent with the knitted brows and the thoughtful look in her eyes and the rimless glasses. She's like the epitome of intelligence and conscience. And yet what she does in the end when faced with something like that is she grovels at the feet of a nasty CNN anchor. I rest my
I've
case.
never been able to. I need to get a knitted brow and some rimless glasses. I never mastered that look. The thoughtful, pensive.
First of all, your rimless glasses are CVS, and that does not.
Oh, don't talk.
That does not.
I got to change that.
That's not hospitable to knitted brows, Mike. You need more expensive glasses. Let's start there.
My wife keeps telling me that.
Well, she may be right. I don't want to get into your family quarrels, but I think I'm on her side on this. So, a slim chance that we're going to get another episode in this week, maybe Tuesday, maybe a few words, maybe something. We'll see what develops.
Well, we'll see what. No, I think Israel's going to attack Iran. I think we should have an episode after that for sure. It's going to be big. That's going to be really, really big. And I'm very apprehensive about it, as you can tell.
So if I don't get hit directly, I'll stay away from Glilot and Turkiz, the restaurant. If I don't get hit directly, then perhaps we will have another episode. But this is one day before the Yotzeit, the 1 year mark of October 7. Thank you for being with us. And since it's also the new Jewish year, may we wish you a happy, warm, loving year of many victories.